Well, hi. Welcome back to part 3 of our series called Unbalanced. And this is going to focus on pretty much on what we call basic horse hay 101. It's just an introduction into the best hay to feed your horse and hopefully give you some information that you may not have had before, especially on the nutritional analysis side. You're used to reading, or maybe not, the tags off the various bags of food that you buy for horses. And this is something you never get with hay. So you're going to have to hear it or read it or do your own research, which I recommend highly, because there's no way possible I can give you all the information in these short podcasts, but hopefully stimulate you enough that you want to go in and look. Your horse is such a precious commodity, and not only the resource of having, this animal is, you provide care for it. You paid, more than likely, you paid for your horse, and whether you did or didn't, you're still providing a service, and that is that you're caring for the animal. And he's also, or she's also, providing a service to you in what the animal can give back to you. So if you've owned a horse, you probably discovered that you can ask different people, what's the best way to feed your horse? And you never get a simple, standard reply. There's so many opinions that people have about what to feed their horse, when their horse should be fed, how much they need, and how different types of feed can affect their horse's behavior and performance. And you may have already tried to do some research on the best hay to feed your horse, and most likely the more you've read, the more confused you become. And hopefully we can turn some of that around now and maybe not make you less confused, but make you a whole lot more interested in trying to find out some better ways to get to your answers. And I hope that's something that we can provide. One thing we know is that every horse has different nutritional requirements. And since the age of the horse, the activity level, the breed, and the size all play important roles in deciding which hay best suits your horse's needs. Some horses may require higher protein for energy, while others may need hay that is lower in protein and is not as rich. For example, a retired, more or less senior horse that has turned out in pasture is not going to have the same nutritional requirements as a high-level performance horse. So there is a consolidated overview of some of the differences here on the different types of hay that you can decide which is the best hay to feed your horse. And like I said, we're just kind of brushing the surface of this and hopefully can give you some idea. Hay falls into a couple categories, and those are legumes and grasses. Most people don't realize that alfalfa hay is not a grass hay. It is a legume hay. And the reason it is because on the roots itself, there are nitrogen fixing nodules on the roots. Causes it to be higher in protein, and it's a very effective feed for cattle, but is not necessarily for horses. And what I mean necessarily is I don't believe any that you can show me that there's a reason a horse should be eating a nutrient-dense food like alfalfa, because it just plays into all the wrong things for the animal. Gastrointestinal problems, digestion, and a tremendous amount of overeating. I don't know if you ever watch a horse eat alfalfa, but what they do is they stick their nose right in the center of it when you throw it in. And they make a little hole. And what they're trying to do with their nose is just get all the tender leaves and any little bits of other things that fall through. It's basically all the sweetness of the alfalfa that's falling through to the bottom, so they eat that first. If a hay is real stemmy, obviously they're not going to eat that. And I believe that alfalfa should also be harvested sooner than what it is rather than longer. Obviously they want more weight on it, and that develops the stem and causes the horse to be a lot more picky about the hay that he's getting, because they won't eat a real stemmy hay of any kind. And so you have to be careful when you choose your hay. Always break open the bale from the center or somewhere on the bale and take a look at the hay. Make sure the hay has a good color to it, that you've got the leaves inside the hay. And I personally wouldn't be so picky about weeds and other plants that are involved with the growth of the hay, because if you have those in there, you've eliminated something that I am very strongly against, and that is using Roundup to dry hay and to kill the weeds. Roundup is not only found to be so detrimental to people, but animals as well. And our larger animals, like horses, show the effects of this, and they're having a tremendous amount of problems. One of them, for sure, is we go through a period right in the fall when Rose and I have found that horses develop, we call it squirting. It's basically they have basically diarrhea that just won't quit. And why is it in the fall? It's because generally horses go off all their pasture then, and they're not transitioned, but they're slapped right into their hay, because you've bought the hay and now you start feeding the hay. And this change in the diet is not specifically what does this to their bowels, but it is it is the Roundup in the hay. Because we found if you give a horse, which I believe today no different than in people, we have to have prebiotics and probiotics in the horse's diet. There are so many things that cannot control the gut issues in the horse that this will help tremendously. It'll help balance out the gut. For all the things that it does to get it upset, this will help bring it about a little bit. And we need to have a better focus on being able to provide good, clean water, especially in the wintertime. And I know it's harder, but a horse needs good, clean water. And they don't generally like to drink anything that's too cold. 45 to 55 plus degrees, I guess, is generally where they consider it ideal. Obviously, we can't all regulate it, but if you have heat that's on the watering vessel that you use in there, whether it be a trough, the best are the automatic waterers, because they don't freeze. They have less, there's no problem with them, because once the horse learns how to use it, which is generally pretty quick, they find that those are the best things for them. They get good, clean water. It's not stagnant, and there's generally nothing floating around in the water tank. And especially parasitic involvement in the water is huge, because stagnant water gets parasites, and they will ingest the parasites when they start to drink the water. And I'm going to try and read from my notes so I don't mess anything up for you, and make sure we can get some type of organized profile to this, so when you hear it, it'll make sense, and at least it'll be in some order. One of the things is that the hay classifications I explained to you, they're legumes and grasses. The legume hay is pretty much what you'll be most familiar with are alfalfa and clover. The grass hays are not limited to, but the most the most that we'll find, and not here because of our area, but timothy, orchard grass, Bermuda, as far as I know, is not here. Brome is here, and bluegrass is not. And we also have oat hay and barley hay. And those are the grasses. And like I said, the legumes are just strictly the alfalfa and the clover, and there's more that are included in that batch, but nothing that's produced here. It said, the nutritional profiles of different types of hay, they can vary considerably, especially when you're measuring fiber, protein content, digestible energy, and mineral composition. And then I'm going to introduce you to some terms when you're evaluating the hay. And one of the things you might want to know, it's just a little side note. Alfalfa has been around basically for as long as man has been cultivating any type of grass. But alfalfa has a very unique property to it, and that is the roots tend to grow extremely deep into the soil. They say as far down as 50 feet, and after about 5 to 10 years, you get alfalfa that have a root system that gets down 10 feet into the soil. So they tend to pick up more minerals and things in the soil, and these are all beneficial for the horse, but not in a, again, like we've used the term before, nutrient dense feed. Horses don't eat that way. They don't need that type of thing. What they do need is they need proper minerals in their diet, which I can't place enough value on that. The minerals alone will stop a lot of the overeating. Horse gets its nutritional supply from the food it eats, and it gets its vitamins when there's enough minerals to process the vitamins inside and release those into the system. So basically a horse that is constantly, they graze pretty much, they'll graze all day. They'll graze 16 hours to 20 hours a day if they have the pasture to go around. And that's the other thing. They're getting the exercise, they're walking. And that's the way a wild horse assimilates its food, is they have all that walking to do plus the pasture. You never see a horse that's big and heavy out in the wild. And you always see them in good shape. The horse has it has the ability to go through the pasture, and it kind of self-medicates itself, I guess is the right word. We look at it, a horse will find what it needs to eat in an open pasture. What we condemn as weeds, noxious weeds, all kinds of stuff, some of these are more than just a little beneficial to a horse, because you'll see if you let a horse out, they will find themselves into the flowers, into the little buds, and all the things that you would think they wouldn't eat. They enjoy eating, and they actually have reason for them. If you look at what that plant is, you'll find out that the plant has got a lot of nutritional need for the horse to fill. So let's discuss some of the things about what you're going to find in a typical analysis about hay. One of the first things you find in a hay analysis, not actually in this order, but you're going to find these all contained in a hay analysis, at least for the most part. One is moisture. Ideally, hay moisture should range between 10 and 17%. Hay that's under 10% may be brittle, dry, dusty. Hay that's over 18% has a high risk of developing mold, and hay over 25% can be a potential fire risk. Now I'm going to go into more detail about each one of these, but we're just going to give you what should be in a proper hay analysis. Next one is crude protein, and again I got to read this so that I don't forget anything here. The protein levels in hay can vary widely depending on the type of hay and when it's harvested. The younger the hay, when it's cut, the higher the protein level will be. Protein levels can range from 8 to 14% in grass hay, 15 to 22% in legume like alfalfa. And a growing horse needs between, they say, 12 and 18% in their diet for growth and development, and mature horses, much lower protein, between 10 and 12. Again, here's a little problem I have with this. There's only two things that a horse needs higher protein for, or maybe three in total. An extremely high workload where the horse is being used a lot, a lactating mare, and also for a young horse, for an immature younger horse that need to get their growth started off good so they get the proper calcium and nutrition and things in their food to help them grow and develop the way they should. So crude protein is represented as CP, pretty standard in the what's the word here? That's the way the word is going to come up in the crude protein, that CP level. The next thing is going to be DE, which is digestible energy, and it's measured by it's a calorie that's inside the hay, and this is going to kind of be something that we're going to glance over a little bit because it's not as important as some of the other ones. It is and it isn't, because you have to have a certain amount of energy equivalent in the hay to produce a proper feed. But also, you're also going to see that, again, too much energy causes the horse to go off the deep end, for lack of better words. They cannot, if you're not using the animal, they can't use the energy either. They can't use all that extra protein or all that extra food nutrition if they're not getting anything, not getting any way to dispense all this energy. One of the things the horse has to do, it has to move. It's got to be mobile. It's no different than a person. You can't go to the icebox all day long and go sit in your easy chair. A horse can't sit in a stall all day and just keep eating. It just doesn't work. And on top of that, you figure that the best thing to do for him is to kind of treat him and give him something else, because you're not doing what you feel is right for him. But it's that confinement that's worse. You're better off taking the horse out for a little bit of walk for both of you. Get the horse out for a while and at least walk the horse for an hour or so. And either riding or just on the ground, one way or the other, but the horse needs to get exercise. So just to recap a little bit real quick, we have moisture. We have the crude protein, which is CP. Digestible energy is DE. And those will be on the analysis slip for the hay when you get it back from wherever you have it analyzed from. The next one is the most important as far as I'm concerned. It's called non-structural carbohydrates. That's NSC. And that's to describe the sugar and starch content. And they are important. Since the carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed into the bloodstream as glucose, which is simple sugar, horses that are insulin resistant are typically put on low NSC or low carbohydrate diets. So here we go. If you ever wondered why your horse is climbing over the stall, and it's because he's given a lot of alfalfa hay and he doesn't have any way of using the protein, let alone the sugars. And that is causing just a spike in his insulin, and he has no way to get rid of it. So that's why you'll see as we get a little farther into this, which is not much more, and we're going to have some recommendations on the hay, again, according to age and their biological needs as they get older or younger. as they're younger to get older, those things will change. The next thing, so just remember the NSC is the non-structural carbohydrates. That's the sugar content. And the calcium content is, calcium and phosphorus is the one that's got to be the hardest one to balance, because our ground is so deficient that there's not any way to do this except through a laboratory analysis. There's no way to check it. The balance ratio between these two minerals of different types of hay is very important, because the two work closely together. Ideal calcium to phosphorus ratio in horses should be between 3-to-1 and 1-to-1. In other words, a horse needs at least as much calcium in the diet as phosphorus, never the reverse. So always remember that the calcium needs to be higher than the phosphorus, and we'll also show you where that balance is supposed to be for them. So those are some of the basic terminology, and it's important that you get that much down so when you read the sheet you'll know exactly where you should be at. And the other thing I can't go back enough is to emphasize on water, especially during the hot months in the summer. Keep your troughs out of direct sunlight, because you get a lot of algae growth and bacteria if you don't clean them on a daily basis, and they should be scrubbed. I know it's a lot of work, but it's either that or you're going to have to pay dearly to have the horse constantly taken care of for either parasitic involvement in their intestine or just sick, period. They've got to have fresh water. And the temperature of the water, as I said before, it is actually 45 to 65 degrees. Horse will drink 10 to 12 gallons a day of fresh water, especially during the summer months. But they actually do still drink a lot during the winter time, because their hay is increased. That's a fiber, and they need the liquid to help digest the hay. Okay, the alfalfa hay, as we talked about, it says the higher protein content is one of the biggest difference between alfalfa and grass. The protein content on the average, alfalfa hay has a much higher level of protein. It ranges from 15 to 21%. And as we talked before, it depends on when the alfalfa was cut. The sooner it's cut, the higher the protein. The later it's cut, the lower the protein. And adult horses, they typically need between 8 and 10% protein requirements in their feed, and around 10 to 12% is generally what they say for younger horses. Again, it just depends on the type of food that they're getting, and you'll get to see that again in just a second here. We'll go back and get over that. So the protein content, we want it to be somewhere around 8 to 10%. And the most important thing here is there's an energy content. The energy content is also different between alfalfa and grass. Alfalfa hay typically has more calories per pound than grass hay. So if you're feeding your horse alfalfa, he may need to consume less to maintain his body weight. The difference is related to the fiber content of the hay. Alfalfa is lower in fiber, while grass hay is higher in fiber, which allows the horse to eat more hay without putting on extra weight. And for this reason, people who want to reduce the calorie intake of their horses will feed grass hay instead of feeding alfalfa. Now, before we get too far along in this and head into the next little section here about calcium, the high NSC levels, which were the sugar content, those can be brought down by soaking the hay in a trough of water, taking it out and draining it. It does a couple things. One is it reduces the level of sugar in the hay, and it also reduces the allergen and dust. It decreases it a whole bunch, and that can play into a lot of problems, like especially when you get horses that cough a lot. You definitely want to go ahead and soak the hay and give them the opportunity to not have so much dust in their hay while they're eating. They can't get their nose out of there, so it's going to get to be a problem, and you don't definitely want to start a inflammation in their lungs to where they're coughing all the time. It gets to be real hard on them, especially when you start riding them and giving them exercise. Now, this next little bit is there is definitely higher calcium levels in alfalfa compared to grass. The mineral profile is different, but alfalfa hay has the calcium. It's higher in calcium than in grass. The phosphorus content, however, usually is not that different between the two hays, and of course the mineral content in all hays will vary depending on where they're harvested and when it's grown, soil conditions. And you might as well know now the soil conditions in the Northwest, as they are most everywhere in the United States, have been depleted since World War II. We have not had this rebuilding of the soil, lost a lot of beautiful topsoil. We just don't have the substance in the soil to generate all the beautiful nutrition that should be there, because we don't go back and we don't take stuff and let it grow and let it decompose in the soil so that we can build a proper soil base. Now, the alfalfa hay analysis, just to give you an idea what an average analysis looks like, the crude protein is 15 to 22%. Crude fiber is 25%. The non-structural carbohydrates, which you remember was the sugar content, is 8.75 to 13.25. The calcium is 1.28 to phosphorus, which is 0.24, which it has a calcium ratio of 5.3 to 1. Now, if you remember right, we said that the ideal for calcium to phosphorus is supposed to be 3 to 1 to 1 to 1. You don't want to get it higher because there's other problems involved, and so it's out of balance. It is out of balance in the alfalfa hay. And here's some of the benefits of grass hay: is lower protein, lower energy, higher in fiber. It's lower in calcium levels. Difference is your horse can be eating this all day long, still gain the proper nutrition, but be full and have the gut health that the horse needs without having the again that term, that nutrient dense type of food, to where they could get in trouble with laminitic problems, and then go on to founder, and then get your horse to just go down, period. I'll read you a few statistics from grass hay real quick. And we read you about the protein levels being lower, the energy content is lower, higher fiber, lower calcium. So let's just look at this at a paragraph at a time here, and we can kind of look. It says grass hay is typically quite a bit lower in protein than alfalfa. The energy content of grass hay is generally lower than alfalfa. For many people who have horses, especially mature, non-working horses or horses that are not used for breeding, grass hay is often preferred because of the lower protein and energy levels. Grass hay is also quite often a good choice for senior horses, as it's easier on their kidneys due to lower protein content and also easier to chew and digest. And that's what we said. That's what we call a stemmy hay. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that. You've had hay that's very stemmy and hard, and horses, they typically won't eat it. It's just too hard for them to chew. And it is something that they don't work past that. They just refuse to eat it. Grass hay is also a good choice for easy keepers, horses that are easily gain weight or struggle to keep their weight down, especially ponies or mature horses. Because of the higher fiber content, grass hay is a convenient solution for these easy keepers since it satisfies the horse's appetite without adding extra calories and protein. And as far as I'm concerned, it stops them from, being overly aggressive, and it balances their nutritional content enough to where they're not just an easy keeper, but they have a very static line for their. They'll find themselves in a real easy place as far as their behavior. They won't be outside of the normal ranges for their behavior. They're not going to be spiked up with too much sugar or too low and have no energy. The last little part I got to read here is grass hay typically has lower nutritional value than alfalfa. We know that. And it's also lower in calcium. We also know that, making it closer and more desirable calcium to phosphorus ratio between 3:1 to 1:1. And grass hay is often less dusty than alfalfa, and it's a good choice for horses that have respiratory issues. And we also explain that a little bit, how you can bypass that by soaking the hay, taking it out, draining it, and then serving it up to your horse, and you'll eliminate a lot of that dust and a lot of the sugar. Okay, let's look at some hays real quick. One is Timothy hay. It's high in fiber. It's very easy to digest. Tends to be a little more expensive than other grass hays, but it's also higher in nutrients than other grass hays. Typical analysis on Timothy hay, the crude protein is 6 to 10%. And like I said, this is very acceptable. That's why I think it's one of the better hays to be feeding, this and orchard grass. But Timothy falls right in at 6 to 10%. And again, with the crude fiber being at 30%, it again is at a really good range. Sugar content is supposed to be an average of around 12%. The range for Timothy runs between 7 and 18%. Calcium is 0.38. Phosphorus is 0.17. So the calcium to phosphorus ratio comes in at 2.2 to 1. Very, very acceptable, right in that range where it should be. The next one is Bermuda grass. It's less expensive and than Timothy and orchard. The quality can be kind of different. And they say that it can cause impaction in horses. I don't know why that is, but I funny feeling that it might have something to do with just the fact that it's not a normal, Bermuda grass is just not a normal food for the animal. But anyway, its crude protein falls in that right range. It's 7 to 10%. Like I told you, 8 is about what I like to see for horses, 8% protein. 7 to 10 is acceptable. Crude fiber, 28%, so it's just a little bit below Timothy. And the sugar content in the hay is 7 to 18%, so it's pretty much in the same range, exactly as the Timothy. Calcium is 0.43. Phosphorus is 0.16. So the calcium to phosphorus ratio is 2.7 to 1. So it falls in that 1 to 1, 3 to 1 to 1 to 1 bracket right at 2.7. So it's a very good calcium to phosphorus ratio. So you're getting a good balance. The next one is orchard grass. Is not as nutrient sensitive at the time of cutting as other grass hays, so it's less expensive than Timothy. So orchard grass retains more of its nutrition and doesn't change a lot as it grows. So orchard grass hay analysis is crude protein is 7 to 11%. Again, that 8% range that I'm looking for is right there. Crude fiber is 30%. Again, good fiber content. Its sugar content, the NSC, is between 7 to 18%, but it averages 12. Its calcium content is 0.34, and phosphorus is 0.23, and comes up with a calcium phosphorus ratio of 1.5 to 1. Again, perfect. It's on the lower end. Don't forget this horse. The horse is going to be eating more of orchard grass than he's going to be eating of some of the others. And when they're fed that, you want to keep these ratios within the ballpark and more or less on the low side because they're constantly feeding on this. I'm going to brush on this last one a little briefly because I know there are some people that feed it, and there's some problems with it, as you'll soon see. It's oat hay. It's got really thick, tough stalks, which some horses just, I'd have to say most of them just won't eat it. When you think of what horses do graze on in a day's time, they don't eat anything like this. They eat the softer grass, and that's what they go to eat. Matter of fact, you can verify this even more in the wintertime, because if a horse is given hay and he has pasture that's under snow, you'll see him actually digging underneath the snow to pick the grass. The grass doesn't die. It's just cold. And so they will prefer to eat that even over eating their hay. But anyway, let's just look at the oat hay real quick here, and it tends to be higher in nitrates and also high in sugar. So it's not an option for insulin-resistant horses. I don't believe it's an option, period, but that's my personal opinion. And oat hay analysis is crude protein is 8 to 10%, so it falls in the right ballpark there. Fiber, 28%. This is where it gets up. The NSC, the sugar content, 22.1%. Calcium is 0.29. Phosphorus is 0.23. So the ratio is 1.3 to 1. So again, not bad, but the sugar content is very high. Now I'm going to touch on something very briefly before I end this particular segment on the hay. We've kind of gone way over my limit, but needed to get it all in so we didn't break it up and put it in another session. But this is going to be just, like I said, just touching on selenium in the diet for horses. Okay, I'm going to actually have to brush over this because there's so many things about it you'll have to read. A horse's basic daily requirement for selenium is only 1 to 3 milligrams per day. 1 to 3 total milligrams per day. And if you look at a 1,000-pound horse, that's not a lot. I mean, that's amazing that it's just that little bit is all they need. Because one of the big problems is that selenium can become toxic. And I know that in our country right here, I don't think we have to worry about it in too many areas, because hay and pasture that's been tested is very low in selenium, and even the selenium in foods is extremely low. So there's no question that this is just something low. But anyway, selenium is tied to vitamin E, and it's an antioxidant. Together, they're essential. They're both essential for antioxidant benefits for reducing the risk of certain muscle problems and exertional syndrome problems in the horse. But it can, like I said, it can be toxic at higher intakes. So Feeding supplements, that's one thing you need to look at the bag, because you don't know if you're poisoning your horse. And even though the bag is showing that selenium content, like I said, only 1 to 3 milligrams per day for a 1,000-pound horse is not a lot. So it doesn't need a great deal of selenium, and most of it is present in their diet. There's some areas where high selenium can be in the soil, and some plants can accumulate unacceptable levels of it, but the forage, you're not going to get in it. But there are risks involved, and you just have to be very careful about what you're feeding and make sure that you get an analysis either off the labeling and look at the analysis. But like I said, 5 pounds of food per day, which is, it seems like a lot, but a lot of people feed an excessive amount of grains and stuff to their horse. 5 pounds of food per day can give them 1.365 milligrams of selenium per day. That's in addition to whatever they get through their feed and through any supplements that you give them. So you have to be extremely careful. Anyway, with that, I was going to hope it'd be a little bit more positive note, but it is what it is. They've kind of driven us back into a corner with the way they take care of horses and food. Horse just needs hay and water. I hate to say it, hate to be the bearer of good news for you, but that's all they need. Supplementing their diet with too many things just causes them to eat way out of the box, and you're going to wonder why they don't want to eat their hay or don't want to do the things they do. But you're going to have a healthier horse over the long run. Anyway, God bless your day. We pray that each one of you got gets a little bit more understanding from the things that we talk about. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Rose or myself. And I guess Rose said too, we're going to spend some time and maybe read some of the questions and get you some answers over the air. But we thank you so much for being with us and being a customer. And if not a customer, we just thank you for joining us here. So God bless your day. And we look forward to talking with you again, and that will be on Unbalanced, and that will be on the Series 4, yet to be determined what we're going to talk about then, but hopefully it'll be something that'll keep your interest up. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.